set up a new streaming service. So Tanner and Chad have been working on this, and there's still some things to work out to get it modified to, hopefully it's going to put the date in there, and so that when you go on our YouTube channel you can sort by date, and it'll be easier to find in a title of whether it is our John study, our Sunday school, our Esther, or our Job study. So maybe tonight will be the last stream on our old system. We're going to be in Esther chapter 3 tonight, finishing up the chapter. We'll start in verse 7 and go through verse 15. It's all about the plot, and the plot has thickened. Starting in verse 7, in the first month, that is the month Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast pur. That is the lot before Haman from day to day and from month to month, and to the 12th month, that is the month Adar. And Haman said unto King Ahasuerus, there is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the people in all the provinces of thy kingdom. And their laws are diverse from all people, neither keep they the king's laws. Therefore it is not for the king's profit to suffer them. If it please the king, let it be written that they may be destroyed. And I will pay 10,000 talents of silver to the hands of those that have the charge of the business, to bring it into the king's treasuries. And the king took his ring from his hand and gave it unto Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, the Jews' enemy. And the king said unto Haman, the silver is given to thee, the people also, to do with them as it seemeth good to thee. Then were the king's scribes called on the 13th day of the first month, and there was written according to all that Haman had commanded unto the king's lieutenants, and to the governors that were over every province, and to the rulers of every people of every province, according to the writing thereof, and to every people after their language. In the name of King Ahasuerus was it written, and sealed with the king's ring. And the letters were sent by posts into all the king's provinces, to destroy, to kill, and to cause to perish all Jews, both young and old, little children and women, in one day, even upon the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month Adar, and to take the spoil of them for a prey. The copy of the writing for a commandment to be given in every province was published unto all people, that they should be ready against that day. The post went out, being hastened by the king's commandment, and the decree was given in Shushan the palace. And the king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city Shushan was perplexed. Let's bow for a word of prayer. Father, tonight as we consider, there is always weak leadership and those that are in authority that are not good, judicious leaders. And sometimes those folks oppose you on principle, and sometimes they oppose you in ignorance. But you are always in control, always working behind the scenes, orchestrating your will and accomplishing that which you choose to do. And I trust that we will learn to be confident that you are and always will be in control. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. It's hard to imagine a much more dastardly, I guess is a good way of saying, situation here in so few of verses. We talked last time we were together about the introduction to Haman here in verses 1 through 6, and how he is an Agagite, which is a royal term for a member of the Amalekites. And so they were supposed to all be destroyed by Israel. Now he is going to use this opportunity, he thinks anyway, to turn the tables. And so you'll notice in verse 7, Haman plots, and he does a really good job of setting this thing up. In the first month, that is the month Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast pur. That is the lot before Haman from day to day and from month to month to the 12th month, that is the month Adar. Now, some of the commentaries say that they sat down and they were doing this and doing this and doing this until they came to an answer. But I found a commentary that has a lot of history references to it and quotes their sources on where they get their information. And this seems to be more that he sat down at one time with the sorcerers over a calendar to decide which day was chosen. And by virtue of the fact, the way that this is described, it says day to day over every month for a year. And so every month is new moon to new moon. That's what the description of a month is when you're talking about the Hebrew description here in the Old Testament. It was always new moon to new moon. Some people think they sat down, spread the whole calendar out in front of them, they cast these stones out there, and whatever date the stones landed on, those were considered the best days to conduct special affairs for the palace because they would have been lucky days. Other folks say they went month by month. They set them down there, throw them out, throw them out, throw them out. And the luckiest day would have been the one where, the most number of things. But whatever the situation is here, you have a very patient individual. Because he calls these fellows together to decide when it's going to happen, and they cast their lots. And when you cast these lots, and we'll talk about that here in just a second, he is willing to wait almost a year because of what in their culture is deemed a magical day or a lucky day. And it's going to turn out to be a very unlucky thing for him because it gives the Jews almost an entire year to prepare. This casting of lots, per is the root word. It means a lot. They would gather the astrologers. That was Persian practice. Oftentimes, we've seen from Nebuchadnezzar all the way through, you have wise men and you have counselors. And a lot of times, some of those guys were the astrologers who would come in and give their wisdom, or they would weigh in on certain things, whether this was going to work or whether this wasn't going to work. Persian practice, they didn't hardly do a whole lot without having, the permission or the blessing of the astrologers. If you will, go to Ezekiel 21, verse 21, because Nebuchadnezzar does this. He wants to do one thing, and some of his other generals want to do something else. And so in Ezekiel 21:21, they decide that the only real way to settle this is let the fates or the gods or whatever decide. And it says, "For the king of Babylon stood at the parting of the way, at the head of two ways, to use divination. He made his arrows bright. He consulted with images. He looked in the liver." In other words, when they are casting the pur, they're using pebbles or broken stones as dice. More frequently than that, they were called omen stones. They weren't called dice. And so you'd chuck those things out there, and wherever they landed, or whatever side they landed up, some were luckier than others. And of course, if two of them landed on the same day, well, then you had a special day going there. I was looking into this just a little bit. Thousands of Mesopotamian texts are called omen texts. It's about their rulers using these different things to decide when to go to war and which way to go to war. Do we attack from this way or do we attack from this way? And sometimes multiple plans would be presented to them about something to do, and so they would spread them out there, and they would, do all this divination to figure out which of the ways, seemed to be the lucky one, or the ones that the gods were smiling on. It's a lot of spiritualism. It's a lot of magic. Raiding the livers of a sacrificed animal. That's what's referred to here in Ezekiel 21:21. We want to know what way we're going, so we're calling on the gods. We're going to sacrifice this animal, and by the time we get the liver out and open it up, the gods are going to speak to us. And don't ask me how in the world what they were looking for in a liver. I didn't really want to know. I guess if it was a healthy liver, it was a good sign, and if it wasn't a healthy liver, it wasn't a good sign. I don't know. A lot of astrology are the stars lining up. You know, where's this star, this star, this star? Where's the king star? Where's the... And so what they're trying to do is find the luckiest day for his plan to work. Now, what he's not doing, which is interesting, Haman is not looking for the best day to go to the king and pitch his plan to him. It's interesting to me that Haman is very secure. He seems to be pretty sure that he can win the king over and get this thing done. But what he does ask the astrologers to do, and what he does get everything involved that he can, is what day is it going to be the most successful for wiping out the Jews once I get the permission of the king? So it's very interesting that he goes ahead and he puts in the footwork, if you will. We're going to talk about the preparation in just a second. The preparation to get everything lined up and be ready to act quickly as soon as he has the king's information. What's really ironic about this is he kind of writes out his own a death sentence on the Jews here. He gets to use his own words. He gets to write it out how he wants to. And it's the 13th day of the first month that he's writing this out. A Passover starts on the 15th day of the first month. So think about it. The Jews are all getting ready to start celebrating Passover. They would be getting stuff together and excited because for them, business is going to end on the morrow. And yet, this letter gets published probably later in the day, I'm going to guess, by the time they wrote it all up, sealed it, and sent it out. And you saw at the end of the passage that Shushan in the palace is perplexed. Why is the king making this big ado with his royal seal that all of these folks could get wiped out, but we're going to wait almost a year before we do it? That's a head scratcher if you're thinking about how things would normally happen politically. If the king has a good reason for wiping out all these Jews, why isn't it happening like next week or next month? Why is it a year down the road? So the whole circumstance here is pretty weird. You have a patient Haman, you have a very pagan Haman, and his pagan stick-to-itiveness about waiting a year is going to cost him, but you also have a very prepared Haman, because even though the date is a long way off, he doesn't wait. Notice that he goes to the astrologers, he gets what he's looking for. It doesn't say he waits until the 11th month to go to the king and pitch the plan. Get the plan signed. He still has plenty of time to send it out to all the province. Listen, they sent the letters out to all the province to gather up all the girls when Esther was taken, right? It didn't take them months to do that. It took months for the purifying process, but it didn't take them months to go and get all these girls from the 127 provinces and bring them in. Well, when the king commands something, it happens as quickly as you can travel. Okay? So they would have had time to get this notice out if he had waited. But he doesn't do that. He goes very quickly to the king. As soon as he has a date settled by the astrologers, he boot gangs it to the court and goes before the king. He doesn't risk losing favor with the king. He doesn't risk someone finding out and persuading the king otherwise. As soon as he has a date and he knows that he can put this thing in motion, boom, he is gone to the king. Knowing full well that once the king signs it, it's the law of the Medes and the Persians. It's written in stone. It's irreversible. Now let's look at the speech that he makes, because this tells you a whole lot about Haman himself. Look at Oh, I'm in Ezekiel 21 still. No wonder it doesn't look great. It's like, it is not what we're talking about here. Look at verse 8. And Haman said unto King Ahasuerus, there is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the people in all the provinces of thy kingdom. And their laws are diverse from all people, neither keep they the king's laws. Therefore it is not for the king's profit to suffer them. Now, let's take this apart piece by piece. There is a certain people. If you want to attribute bad character to someone, then it is important that you attribute a bad name to them. And so what he does is he doesn't even mention them by name. He doesn't say, well, there are these Jews. Because if he does, then maybe something Haman thinks of, or Ahasuerus thinks of, comes to mind. Because you got to remember, there was a Jew, Mordecai, who saved his life. So we don't want to bring anything to the king's thinking that would get him thinking on his own. He is setting this thing up. He describes them as a despicable people, not worth having around, and certainly not worth protecting. And so he starts that off by basically saying they're not worth naming. There's this group of people, they're like no ones. You know, no one really knows where they came from. No one really cares. Nobody... it's just, I mean, there are these people, and they're troublemakers. He starts with a very vague generalization of every Jew. And then he throws in scattered abroad in every province. Not incorporated like a nation. You know, you have folks in Syria, and they're Syrian, and you have folks in, and so he could have named nationality groups within the 127 provinces, but what he's doing is he says you have this one group of people who are just like scattered everywhere. They're more like nomads than they are really a people group, and they're everywhere. Which is probably an exaggeration, because I have a hard time imagining, even though the Jews would have been scattered abroad, if you were carried to Persia and you were set up near the palace, why would you travel all the way, weeks travel, to the far end of the empire? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me that they were in all of the 127 provinces, unless some of them were authority figures there. Maybe there were some Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego still lingering around in some of these places. But this is a veiled threat, because the threat seems really great. The suggestion here is you have this nobody people that aren't really organized, and they're not really an identity unto themselves, and they're scattered throughout all of the 127 provinces. King, they're everywhere. And the suggestion is, but what if they do organize? Because then you have somebody in every section of the 127 provinces. Third thing he says about them, they have laws of their own and they don't keep your laws. These guys are dangerous, King. Would the king have not known if the Jews were regularly breaking the law? I mean, isn't that what he's saying here? These guys don't obey your laws. Well, if you're not obeying King Ahasuerus' laws, and you have Jews that are getting punished for it, and eventually you're going to start having Jews that are put to death for it, right? Because you don't just run around disobeying the king all the time. And if he starts to get reports from one town and then another town, and then it seems like a whole province is involved, and then there's 2 or 3 provinces or 10 provinces, and it's the same group of people that are all involved in not obeying the king, don't you think he would have already been dealing with this? He's been on the throne for 12 years. In 12 years, he has not had problems with the Jewish people obeying his laws. But you notice again that this is an exaggeration of one Jew that wouldn't obey his law, because Mordecai refused to bow down to Haman. And he said, it's because I'm a Jew. So when it gets to the king, well, you got these Jews that are living everywhere and they refuse to bow down to me. They don't obey your laws, king. He's going to close the deal here at the end of verse 8 and in verse 9. Therefore, it is not for the king's profit to suffer them. There is no profit in them. In other words, hey, king, they are not worth keeping around. It's not like these guys are the skilled people. It's not like these guys are the prosperous citizens. It's not going to hurt your kingdom in any way to kill all of them. I'm just watching out for you there, Kingy Poo. I'm telling you, this could potentially be a dangerous situation, and we better do something. And oh yeah, verse 9, speaking of profit, if it please the king, let it be written that they may be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver to the hands of those that have the charge of the business to bring it into the king's treasuries. I'll give you 10,000 talents of silver. Now, the only thing I could find on this is based on a little assumption. But one of the guys says that secular writing claims that in excess of 12,000, I think is what he said, talents of silver is what the Persian Empire took in taxes in a year. And so what he's offering here is in excess of 2/3 of the taxes for a year. In other words, I'll tell you what, king, these people are dangerous. They're not really good for anything. They're scattered everywhere. If they identify, they could cause a lot of problems. I think now is the time to deal with them. So I'll tell you what, if it please the king, let it be written so that it's official, and it won't even cost you anything. Now, think about this. He fought a very expensive war that cost the Persian Empire a great deal in trying to conquer Greece. And they're trying to fill the coffers back up. And so he comes to the king and he says, I'll tell you what, I'll bring you this ridiculous sum of money if you'll let me go ahead and get rid of these folks now. I can get rid of the threat and you'll have all kinds of money. Sounds like a wonderful idea, doesn't it? Bribery to act, gaining from plundering them while they're killing them. See, he knows that when he goes and kills them, he has to keep all their stuff. And so while 10,000 talents of silver, and one man quotes that if you were to put this in today's money, and I believe his today's money was 2016, he said it would be like $2.4 million using the Persian talent and not the Jewish talent. The Jewish talent would be twice that much. I can't see that Haman would be using a Jewish talent. Anyway, it's a lot of money. Why? Well, he knows that he's going to get a whole lot of money back when he kills these people and he takes all their stuff and he sells it and he confiscates all of their goods. Really nice guy here. I'm going to kill people and make a bunch of money off of it. And notice the intent. Because the intent is very plainly stated. Let it be written, I want an official edict, and that's all I require of you, king. I'll take care of all the rest if you'll simply let me write a edict and you sign it. That's all you have to do. Sign it. Simple. No sweat, no worry. You don't have to research anything. You don't have to do anything. Don't want to bother you with it. I'll write it and you sign it. I'll take care of it. But what I want is that they may be destroyed. And he goes on to say when he writes it, everyone. This is what the nation of Israel was supposed to do back in the Amalekites when Saul was king. Everyone. Every last single one of them. And now you have an Agagite saying, now it's my turn, and I'm going to get every last single one of you. Verses 10 and 11, he gets permission. Now this is an amazing thing. If you think about this, and the king took his ring from his hand and gave it unto Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, the Jews' enemy. And the king said unto Haman, the silver is given to thee, the people also, to do with them as it seemeth good to thee. The giving of the ring. This is his signet ring that made all the decrees official. You made a decree, you melted some wax on it, and then he would stick his signet ring in there. And nobody messed with it. Law of the Medes and the Persians. Once that ring hits wax, it's unchangeable. If you want to examine the law, if you want to think about it, or you want another day to question the gods, then don't stick your ring in the wax. But once the ring goes in the wax and it's sealed, it is a done deal. And that's why they call it sealed by the king's hand, because he kept that signet ring right on his hand. Haman has all the authority, in other words, to act in the king's name. Now turn to Proverbs chapter 18 and verse 13. Because if you didn't know anything from history about Ahasuerus, you already know something from him in this book. In Proverbs 18:13 it says, he that answereth a matter before he heareth it, it is folly and shame unto him. Now, in my estimation, this is the third time this big old boy here has gotten himself in pride problems. He's throwing him a huge party to try and get all of his folks together and get a lot of support to go to war. And while he's half drunk and he's been partying, he calls and asks the queen to do something he probably normally wouldn't do, and she refuses him. And so he lets his counselors talk him into excommunicating her, basically, never to come before her face again, which isn't a problem because he's going to go off to war. And like everything else in his life, he makes a tragedy of that too. He loses a lot of life, he wastes a lot of money, and he's kind of embarrassed because he comes home from Greece unable to conquer them. And when he gets home, he doesn't have a whole lot of solace in anything else, so he wants to go and talk to his queen, who he used to confide in, and then it's like, oh yeah, I made a hasty decision, and now it's come back to haunt me. I went to war and made a bunch of hasty decisions, and now it's come back to haunt me. And here he is again, with an entire people that have been asked to be exterminated, and he just takes his ring off, hands it to Haman, and gives him all authority to write the law however he wants to and seal it. Listen, Haman could have wrote 4 laws and sealed him while he was out there. And because the king has signed it with his ring, how do you change it? This is a very hasty, very foolish act. Weak character. I act on a whim, and then I deal with the regrets later. But look at the 2 statements he makes. The silver is thine. Keep your money. Boy, if somebody came up to you and offered you $2.5 million to be able to do something, and then told you, well, these people are, I mean, we could pick somebody. Don't like West Virginians, let's say. We need to exterminate them. And West Virginians are running all over the place. They're in all 50 states in the United States. So we're going to mosey on up to Congress, and we'll give the government $2.5 million if they'll allow us to hunt down and exterminate all West Virginians on one day. If anybody from West Virginia is watching this, please don't get upset. It's just an example. I mean, how foolish would it be, right? And with just this simple little speech, he doesn't go and look it up. He doesn't ask any counselors to come in. He slips his ring off his finger, hands it to Haman, and allows Haman to go write the law any way he wants to, seal it, and put it in motion that it can't be changed. And he says, keep your money. So it seems like he is persuaded that this was important enough to be done anyway. I don't need you to pay me to kill him. I'll just pay to kill him. Because it sounds like our kingdom would be a whole lot better off without these unnamed nomadic people running around that aren't much good to us anyway. And oh yeah, do with whatever you want to with the people. What kind of a king would say that and commit an entire nationality that somebody could do whatever you want to with them? Verses 12 through 15, it's a done deal. Unbelievable that he is able to set this down. But here is a prepared individual who knows what he wants to do, and he carries it out very quickly, because the same day, look what he says, then were the king's scribes called. As soon as he had the ring in his hand, he hollered for the king's scribes. On the 13th day of the first month, there hasn't even a day gone by. They haven't thought about it. They haven't asked anybody else about it. He finds his date. He walks into the king, has a short conversation with the king. The king takes his ring off and hands it to him, and he calls for the scribes, and they are writing the law, and only hours have passed. Sounds like our government sometimes. It's an official government document. The scribes worded it. It's sent to every official in every position. It's written in every language, and it is sealed with the king's ring. And it's sent out hot off the presses so they can be ready. See what it says? End of verse 14. That they should be ready against that day. What's going to take them a year to do? Can you imagine for the Jewish people what that year would be like? Because everywhere you go, people be looking at you. I mean, on such and such a day, you're dead. People were probably planning to buy their houses or do their farms for them or what. I mean, imagine it. What a year it would be knowing that on this day, 11 and a half months later, you're going to die. And they're probably, every guy in every province, making a list of every Jew, name by name, and where they live, because the edict says that on that, what? Day, in 127 provinces in all of the Persian kingdom, in one day, there's not supposed to be a Jew left alive, breathing by the time the sun goes down. Wow. Prepared to see it done in one day. And I would imagine that this was kind of a big deal for Haman, because he thinks he's won. It's a done deal. It is sealed. And now every time he walks by that guy out there at the king's gate and he won't bow to him, he's probably thinking in his mind, 135 more days, dude. And the next day when he walks into the palace and he won't bow to him, he's going, 134 more days, dude. And I don't have to put up with you all anymore. What an incredible plot. But man, what an awful king. And yet, God has put him on the throne and has put Esther beside him to fully accomplish his plan. And that starts getting hashed out in the next chapter.